Hello, everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I am Priyanka. I'm a writer, researcher, and mystic, and this is my very first YouTube video. This is just going to be a short introduction to spiritual science, the defining qualities of spiritual science, and why is it the future of spirituality. So, I'm just going to begin by briefly introducing you to my work, and I will tell you a little bit about my journey and what even got me attracted to spiritual science. So, I write on Substack and I use spiritual science as an anchor point and I bring it together with science to understand our inner and outer worlds. The inner world being the feminine aspect of spirituality, which is all about healing, getting over your traumas, and reaching your highest potential. And then the masculine leg of spirituality is the outer world, which is about understanding the larger cosmos, different world events, whether it's social, cultural, or political issues, which society is more or less used to just seeing from a very physical and materialist lens. So I wasn't always into spirituality. In fact, I was an atheist and I was into the left wing ideology maybe about 6 to 7 years back. And then I got into conspiracies, and that's also when my spiritual journey started. But I have been a part of different belief systems just because of this quest in me to understand the world, understand why is there so much pain and suffering in the world, who are we, what are we here to do, and similar questions that most of us have, right? Like, what is this reality? But my spiritual journey was very scattered. I would read random books here and there, like Laws of the Spirit World or Conversations with God, but I was never really a part of a spiritual system. And that all changed when spiritual science entered into my life. Traditionally, spiritual science is associated with anthroposophy by Rudolf Steiner and theosophy by Madame Blavatsky. And these are great psychics and mystics who started this entire movement around the 1900s. And they have put forth vast amounts of knowledge and information about our reality through their mystical and psychic transmissions and also deep spiritual study of various wisdom traditions. So even though they are associated with Western mysticism, Blavatsky, for example, she heavily draws from Hindu wisdom and Buddhism, because even though spiritual science was very strongly started by these movements, it is ultimately a way of thinking, a way of looking at spirituality. So the first few defining qualities of spiritual science is all about expansiveness, openness, and synthesizing of different knowledge systems. We do not believe in limiting ourselves to any one religion, any one philosophy or wisdom tradition. What we do is we bring together and find common patterns and common threads between all of the different wisdom traditions, because at the end of the day, no matter how corrupted or distorted something has become, it does hold several kernels of truth. And when you bring together different systems, you can in fact clear through the distortion and find out common patterns that can help us understand our reality even better. And in the modern day, this also means bringing spiritual science together with science, because ultimately the scientific world is just attempting to understand our spiritual world in the language of logic. You can read this one article of mine on comets, which is really mind blowing because science is just discovering things that have always been known in spirituality. So, in spiritual science, we intend to approach our spiritual realities with the same degree of preciseness and objectivity with which we use science to approach the physical world. So, for example, when it comes to our material world, we agree that these are the species of plants, animals, and birds, or these are the laws of physics, or this is our physical anatomy. But for the longest time, when it comes to spirituality, we have been dominated by superstition, fear, and dogma. This really goes into the study of the macrocosm, which is our larger cosmos or outer space. And spiritual science takes us beyond materialist science, which just looks at outer space as rocks and spheres, or even fringe science, which materializes the spiritual by just using too much of the language of dimensions and densities. The cosmos is a spiritual organism We live within the body of spiritual beings that expand through the cosmos through different planes of consciousness. What the physical human body is to the human soul are what the celestial bodies are to different spiritual beings. And this involves the study of the angelic hierarchies and how they work through different planets and stars, and also how they work upon the human being. And we truly get to understand their nature. And when we understand the angelic hierarchies through the cosmos, we also understand our process of evolution. And we also understand the demonic hierarchies and the lesser beings, such as the plant kingdom, animal kingdom, mineral kingdom, and the different elements of nature, and how all of these different factors in our cosmos come together from our physical reality to the higher spiritual realities in this interconnected process of evolution and involution. We also get to solve the mystery of our creation, which is not as much of a mystery as we think it is, how the human being was created, how the solar system was created. And as we do that, we also get to understand our microcosm. That means how the cosmos is literally crystallized and distilled into our physical and energy bodies. So, spiritual science gives us an understanding of our microcosmic nature, and it very beautifully uses that to provide us with a structure and system of spiritual development. So, this extends from self awareness to developing your supersensible abilities. So, becoming a moral person first, acquiring different qualities and controlling your mind, your desires, your emotions, and then at the same time, it offers some really great spiritual practices to develop your supersensible abilities. Now, the third defining quality of spiritual science is that it provides the modern human with a kind of lexicon of spirituality that really speaks to us. And this is also why it is going to be the future of spirituality. Now, I will touch upon this by first explaining how does our consciousness evolve through different cycles of time. And if you're someone who believes in the Darwinian materialist theory of evolution, I have written an article on it debunking it. You can go check that out. So, we all have this idea in society, right, that our ancestors were so advanced, they had so much wisdom. This is not because they were more advanced than us, but this is related to the mysteries of materialization and spiritualization. So, at the beginning of any developmental epoch, humans or any life form starts in the state of pure spirit. And then, through thousands and thousands of years, we slowly fall down into matter, and then we rise up to spirit again with much higher spiritual wisdom. That is, if we learn our lessons. And this has been expressed through different traditions, basically every tradition possible, and very accurately spoken of through the yoga cycles. So, the fall from Satya Yuga to Kali Yuga, which makes up the first 12,000 years of a complete Mahayoga cycle, is the falling from spirit into matter. And then rising from Kali Yuga to Satya Yuga, which we are currently a phase that we're entering into, is the rise from matter into spirit. So, if you think about the various wisdom traditions from the Egyptian tradition, Hinduism, Persian, or even the shamanic traditions, they existed in a time where our consciousness was much more ethereal, it was dreamlike. Humans could directly perceive spiritual beings. The veils between the spirit world and our physical world were thinner. Humans did not have that spark of self consciousness or the higher ego as we have today. And as this consciousness slowly faded away, humans completely fell into matter. We were given the spark of the higher ego or self consciousness, and our task was to now find that God spark from within us instead of drawing it from the outside. And this can also be seen in the journey of a human being. For example, children are seen as a very direct manifestation of the divine. They retain that God spark upon incarnation, and then as you grow up, you hit puberty, you lose that God spark, you become corrupted when you get into the outside world, and then your task is to cultivate that divine essence from within you and regain that innocence, but in a much, much higher form. And this is something that is also very evident when you compare and contrast different scriptures. scriptures. For example, the Bible talks about spiritual beings as if they were literally there. Or you can also compare the Vedas and the Upanishads. The Vedas were written much earlier and they were very like mythological and ritual focused, and the Upanishads were based on a lot of philosophy and your internal world. So, as we develop this quality of self consciousness, humans slowly started developing the intellect, right? And several mystics, not just anthroposophy, theosophy, but Sri Aurobindo or Yogananda. So, several great mystics talk about the harmonizing of the intellect and intuition. And the intellect plays several important roles. It is subordinate to the intuition, but what happens is that when you engage in an objective spiritual study of a cosmos, of your own nature, that knowledge conceived through your intellect acts as codes that open the hidden wisdom that is already stored within your genes, within your energy bodies. So, through your intellect, you can absorb this information and expand your consciousness. And intellect also helps us to transmit and express our intuition into the outer world. So, the task of the human being is to bring together and harmonize the intellect and intuition, reason and inner knowing, and get rooted into our heart and access our higher mind or manas, which is the first stage of spiritual development. And it is not like intuition, which comes in shots and phases. The higher mind is when you exist in that supramental consciousness of inner knowing, and it's just the first stage. There are many more stages above that. But as you can see, the intellect and the studying of objective spiritual knowledge plays a very important role for humanity today. And this is the reason why I say spiritual science is the future, because it properly speaks to the human mind. Lastly, spiritual science also brings new information. If we think we are evolving, then the spiritual worlds are also evolving, right? So when people say that we need to go back to the ancient times, that's not entirely accurate. Humans have evolved, our consciousness has evolved, and we need to not see it as Eastern versus Western spirituality. We need to see it as a progression. The Eastern spirituality speaks of different things, and now it has progressed on to Western spirituality, which speaks of the nature of evil in a very different way. For example, today, one of the greatest challenges that humanity is facing and will face more so in the future is technology. And not just technology in the sense of over losing our attention spans. Well, it expands onto techno occultism. That means understanding the spiritual nature of technology and artificial intelligence, which has been touched upon very in much detail in spiritual science. That's about it, guys. So, this was my introduction to spiritual science. I hope I was able to do some justice to it. And if you have any thoughts or opinions, I would love to hear in the comments. Please forgive me if I've faltered. This is my very first YouTube video. And if you're someone who's interested in reading, please also go check out my Substack. Otherwise, yeah, please like, share, subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you soon.